My name is Linda Abraham, and I am the president of Accepted and the moderator for today's webinar. I'm very excited that we'll be presenting today How to Nail Your Med School Interviews, to be presented by Sydney Foote. Prior to joining Accepted, Sydney worked as an administrator at the University of Washington School of Medicine. She is also the author of the ebook Write Your Way to Medical School and 2 other ebooks. She joined Accepted, I think, in 2000 or 2001, so she is a highly experienced medical school admissions consultant. And without further ado, Sid, it's all yours.
Thanks, Linda, and welcome to everyone who's joined us here tonight. I'm really glad to see so many people here. I'm sure that it's been a really long application season for you all, and by now I know that you just want it to be over, and I know that a lot of you are probably getting a bit nervous and feel like a lot's riding on the success of your interview. The good news is that it is, and what we're going to talk about tonight should help you feel a bit more confident and hopefully convince the interviewers that you're the applicant that they need for their program. Before we start, I'd like to share a short clip from the TV drama ER. A lot of you are probably too young for ER, but I always considered it a classic. And here, the doctors are reluctantly sitting in on medical school interviews.
So, Kevin, why do you want to be a doctor?
I've given that question a great deal of thought, and I think it all boils down to one thing. I really want to help people. My dad died of lung cancer, and I was 12, and I vowed I would work for a cure.
My research in molecular biology has been very rewarding.
I expect we'll see gene therapy in our lifetime.
I'm a people person. The bottom line is, I really want to help people.
I volunteered for the pediatrics ward. I'm very empathetic.
When I saw my kitty suffering like that, I knew that I had a calling
to help people in their time of need.
And I think you have to combine humanistic skills
with a passion for making a difference.
And I really just want to help people.
I just want to help people.
I want to help people.
Help people.
What it is an interview with the doctors from ER that are interviewing medical school applicants. And in the video, everyone that comes in has different stories about their motivations and what they've done, but the key is that every single one will cause, and uniting science and humanistic values is what physicians are doing every single day. But in interviews, if you and every other person are saying that, it's just not going to stand out. What I want to help you with is making your story stand out and be remembered after all this noise about helping people is gone. So today we're going to go over some of the basics of the traditional medical school interview. These might seem a little too basic for some of you, and some are common sense, but I'm asked a lot of these questions frequently, so I think they're worth covering. After that, we'll talk about preparation and how you can construct a story that goes beyond wanting to help people and shows the real you. We'll also tackle some common questions that I've seen applicants struggle with. And finally, we'll talk about some practice methods. So, the basics. One of the most popular questions that I'm asked is, what should I wear? Professional attire makes a positive impression. That applicant in the video that's wearing a leather jacket, that's a really bad idea. For men, conservative suits are your best choice. Black, navy, gray, charcoal suits are all fine. Make sure you pair it with a tasteful dress shirt and tie in a contrasting color. The blue that this applicant is wearing looks good. Burgundy, green, other traditional colors are recommended. It's very important that your suit fits well. So make sure the shoulders fit you and the sleeves aren't too long or too short. Same with the pants legs. Not everybody can afford a bespoke suit, but visiting a tailor for a few alterations can be a really wise investment that can help you make the best impression. Wear a belt that matches your shoes and make sure not to forget to polish your shoes. Minimize your accessories. A watch and tie pin and perhaps a wedding ring are really the limit. Like I said, a lot of this is really basic, but I think that, a lot of people don't pay enough attention to it, and, these just be confident and look as conservative as you can, and you won't go wrong. In terms of personal grooming, I'm often asked about facial hair. It's fine so long as it's well groomed. Same with your nails. A manicure isn't necessary, but clean yourself up. Show them that you've made an effort and that this is important to you. Women have a bit more leeway, fashion-wise. A suit with either a skirt or pants is fine, however you feel more comfortable. Dark blue, black, charcoal gray suits are popular, but if you feel more comfortable in a nicely cut suit in a different color, maybe a lapis blue, not a bright pink or fuchsia, then go for it. Some interviewers are actually relieved to see something other than the standard issue. There's a regional preference, though, that you should be aware of. East Coast schools tend to be more traditional than those on the West Coast, where a nice colored blouse might be chosen over a white button-up. Keep it conservative, though. A skirt that rides up when you bend over or sit down won't make a good impression, nor will a shirt that gapes. For shoes, closed toes look more professional, and flat heels can be a real plus. You could be walking an awful lot on your interview day, so wear suitable shoes so you can keep up. And of course, keep your accessories to a minimum. As with men, personal grooming is important. Make sure your nails are neat and clean with a tidy polish, don't overdo the makeup, and don't try to do anything too fancy with your hair. Just keep it out of your eyes and away from your gestures so that it isn't too distracting. To keep yourself calm on interview day, prepare your attire the night before. If you've flown to get to the interview, you might not want to check your suit at the airport. There's too much risk of it getting lost. You can always put it in a carry-on, and if it's wrinkled, just borrow an iron from the hotel or hang it in the bathroom while you take a hot shower and let the steam release the wrinkles. Make sure your shoes are shined and that you have everything you'll need for the next morning. Also prepare anything else you might want to bring to the interview. My checklist includes a map of campus, breath mints, chapstick, a book or your Kindle to read while you're waiting. A stain remover pen is also a good idea if you have room. And I also recommend you bring along your complete ANCAS application, the secondary for that school, and a good old-fashioned pen and pad of paper. It's handy to be able to jot down some notes while you're being interviewed without staring down at your phone or relying on technology that might fail you at the wrong time. If you're not familiar with the campus, you might try to explore it a bit before the interview and get a feel for whether you might fit in there. This can also spark some questions that you might have for the interviewer. On the day of the interview, you want to arrive early. Minimize your stress by giving yourself plenty of time to negotiate public transportation or to find parking. Some people also find it helps to take a brisk walk around the campus before reporting to the interview location. This can burn off nervous energy, but it can also give you a good feel for the school. When you arrive and check in, politely ask if you could get the names of any people who will be interviewing you. Write them down. This will help you both when you meet them and when you're writing thank you notes later. In the waiting room, you'll probably be surrounded by other applicants. There's often a lot of waiting between interviews, so I like to have something to read, and often that sparks conversations. Often interviewers will actually ask what books you're reading currently. It's fine to read on your phone, but be sure to turn it on silent as soon as you get to the interview location. A client once asked me if he should talk to his fellow interviewees in the waiting room. It's fine so long as it does not interfere with your own preparation. After all, these could be your colleagues someday, but if anyone seems to be intimidating or makes you feel nervous, it's perfectly all right to excuse yourself. Go to the restroom or get a text that you simply must answer and just excuse yourself. This will give you a chance to collect your thoughts and refocus on what's important, you. That moment when you're called into the interview room, that's the moment that can bring all your anxieties to the fore. To rein these in, take just a second to compose yourself before you stand up. When you do, hold your head up high. As you take your first step forward, be aware of how you walk. Slouching is a nonverbal sign of insecurity and indifference. Enter the room with as much confidence as you can muster. A smile, a firm handshake, and greeting the interviewer by name will help you create a positive impression. Once you're in the interview room, you'll be asked to sit either at a table or possibly with nothing in front of you. In the video we watched, several interviewees were leaning back in their chairs and some even had their knee up on the desk. While you do want to be comfortable, this looks overly familiar and you really won't come across as a professional if you're that relaxed. Here's a quick exercise that you can do in the waiting room and in the interview room and that we can practice right now. Sit up as straight as you can, wherever you are, with your feet planted on the ground. Take a second to roll your shoulders to make sure that you're relaxed. Be aware of what your arms are doing. Are they crossed or are your hands in your pockets? These nonverbal signs can signal discomfort or nervousness. Instead, fold your hands lightly in your lap, ready to gesture when they're needed. I also find that breathing exercises can really help me manage stress. A deep breath and a calming exhale can help you get started before you begin. Good breathing will also help you control the tone of your voice and help you speak with more confidence. How do you feel right now? Are you ready to start the interview with an engaged and animated tone? Next to nonverbal cues, Your tone says the most about your interest and enthusiasm. Some people will flatten their voices into a monotone when they get nervous. One thing I've noticed in mock interviews is that when someone with a monotone starts talking about something that really, truly interests them, they start to sound a lot more excited about it. This emphasizes to me the importance of practicing your stories until you know them inside and out, so that you can share them with some real excitement. Other people tend to get more nervous and their voices can rise or shake or get too fast. The best way to deal with this is by consciously slowing down and gaining control of your breathing. Try focusing on just one person in the audience as you intentionally slow down your speech and inhale. The pitch of your voice should lower as you continue. We'll talk about interview questions in just a minute, but right now I'd like to fast forward to after the interview, when you'll probably just want to take off your suit and relax. Instead, take a moment, and while the experience is fresh in your mind, record as much as you can. Try to scribble down the questions, and if there were any that stumped you, be sure to put a star by those. I remember one client who was so sure she flubbed an answer that in her thank you note, she explained that she'd been reflecting on this question and had wished that she'd said this. She is subsequently accepted there. Even if you don't take such a bold step, knowing which answers you need to work on will help you as you prepare for the next interview. And knowing which stories generate interest can help you figure out what you should retell in later interviews. I mentioned thank you letters earlier, and right after the interview is a great time to take care of these. They don't need to be long, just a few lines, preferably referencing something you discussed with that person, will go a long way to jogging their memory favorably. Write them while they're fresh in your mind and upload them to your school's online application portal, and you can just check that item off your list. Does anybody have any questions before we go?
I have a couple of questions here. One is from Ali. Do you have any strong feelings on a bow tie versus a regular tie?
I know bow ties are a little more popular now. I would be more conservative. I'd stick with a traditional tie. I mean, bow ties have different impressions for different people. So I think just to be on the safe side, just a regular tie is probably better.
Okay. We have one question from Dahlia. What if you wear a hijab?
That is fine. If that is, your religious and cultural preference, then you should definitely, wear it. Don't change something that is about yourself for the interview. I think that you'll find out a lot about that school if you find that it's not accepted there, and that's not somewhere that you want to be.
Okay. Andre asks, is it more recommended for a thank you letter to be uploaded to the application portal or handwritten and mailed?
So this is a constant, ongoing debate. A lot of people, I think it is an age-based thing. I always love handwritten notes, but the application portals and some schools are, recommending that you put everything in it. On the administrative side, it makes it much easier to get it, electronically. So if that's what's recommended, then follow those instructions. But, if you're talking to an older person, it doesn't hurt to drop them something in the mail. That is probably going to be more appreciated.
Okay. Aaron asks, if I had interviewed over a month ago, would thank you letters at this point be too late?
Pretty late, yes, unfortunately. You want to do those within about a week. I'd say any longer than that's really stretching it. Although if you have an excuse, if something, actually I would take that back. If you have not written a thank you letter, I would do it, but I would explain why it's taking you so long. And hopefully your explanation isn't just, I didn't bother. If you had some urgent things to take care of or anything like that, you can always explain them and use that as an update for anything else that has happened in the meantime.
Okay, great. Rohan asks, regarding earrings on men, should they be taken off for the interview?
I would recommend that. Again, that's the kind of question that, if they don't like it, is that somewhere that you really want to go to? But I mean, some schools are going to be much more progressive. Like Rocky Vista has a reputation of being, very accepting of piercings and tattoos and all sorts of things. Whereas if you're applying it, a more traditional East Coast program, you might want to, just take it out for the interview. Again, it really depends if it is that important to you and you know that you wouldn't be comfortable without it, then it's a good way to see if that school's right for you.
Okay. Dahlia, who asked about the hijab a minute ago, said she was talking about the color. Should it be a plain color, or is it okay to wear something with a mix?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I've seen some beautiful ones that are, colorful or, styled in different ways. I would definitely keep it on the traditional side. So I wouldn't have anything too vibrant or gaudy. But, maybe some muted patterns, treat it like if you were wearing a dress with a nice pattern on it. You wouldn't want something that's just, too bold. But yeah, I think that, if it's something that's conservative and looks nice, I think it would be fine.
And then Dara asks, is it better to wear a dress and blazer for a woman, a dress and blazer, or a skirt, blouse, and blazer?
Usually I would recommend a suit. So a skirt, and blouse, and a skirt, blouse, and blazer. And try to get something that is a combination suit, not just things that are put together if possible. You want to look as, professional as possible.
Okay. I think we should continue, and then we can come back to additional questions later.
Sure.
Okay. But excellent questions.
Okay, great.
Audience, you can feel free to post your questions as we're proceeding.
Okay. So we've talked about some of the physical things that can help you prepare and perform well on the day. So let's move on to preparing content, the story of you that will leave a lasting impression. You could start out by writing out the perfect answers to every question and then reading them over and over and over until you can recite them. I recommend this approach only if you're an accomplished actor. If you're comfortable memorizing scripts and delivering them verbatim, then this is a great way to do it. Kate Blanchett could probably pull this off. But for everybody else, I recommend a different approach. What I help my clients do, and what I don't hope I can help you do today, is to prepare efficiently and become comfortable with your stories so that you can share them in a positive and engaging way. I can't give you answers to the questions you'll be asked, but I can give you a method for addressing them, which should help you answer both the questions you expect and those you never saw coming. To do that, I'd like you to address a few questions. First of all, your goals. How do you want the interviewer to think of you? When you leave the room, what are the 3 key impressions that you want to leave them with? Second, your strengths. What can you tell them about yourself that will reinforce your strengths and address your key weaknesses? And third, how can you show them that you know a great deal about the school, that you are well prepared for the interview, and just as importantly, how can you learn what you need to know to decide whether the school is right for you? Preparing the answers to these questions takes place long before the interview. In fact, you can start it tonight, and the earlier, the better. In answering these questions, you'll set goals for the interview and give yourself a clear idea of what impression you want to leave the interviewer with beyond the desire to help people. So let's break these down a bit. I'd like you to take just a quick moment and share how you might want an interviewer to think of you. Can you take just a minute and type that in the box, please? I'm looking for things like what you want the interviewer to remember. They could be qualities like being compassionate or adventurous.
Unique, says Oni. If I mispronounce somebody's name, please forgive me. Derek, passionate about my key interests. Hanan, personable.
These are good ones.
Perseverant, says Ayushi. Rima says hardworking. Laura says capable and competent. Deepti says empathetic. Kenneth, a risk taker. Dara, self-driven. Maria, focused. Barbara, altruistic about helping people. Victoria, resilient. I like the individuality that's coming through here. Andre, accountability. Sandeep, desire to be the first doctor in the family. Milan, resilient. Michaela, passionate and focused. Kara, competitive. Rohan, unique. I want them to remember me as a resilient person who deals well under stress. Shadi. Respectful, says Vishali. Grit, says Aaron. Community driven, says Ali.
Great. Okay, these are good ones.
Yeah.
This is the like I say, this is the first step towards making sure that you can convey that. Now, all of your stories can come back to this general idea of what you want them to remember. I do want to take a quick note about hard worker, which a lot of people say. This is an answer I hear most often, and you can always make the case that if you're applying to medical school, I mean, pretty much everybody is going to be a hard worker. I don't think that's the best way to help you stand out. So while that's important, I think rephrasing that as something like persevere, or that you persevere, or that you're resilient, or even goal-oriented are all better ways to say that than just saying that you're a hard worker. So that's just my personal pet peeve, because I do see that one so much. But these are the answers. The things that you put right there are the answers to that question. If there were 50 applicants in this room, why should we pick you? This is what your personal statement and your secondary essays have already begun to answer. And if you've done a good job on those, and you did if you've been invited to interview, then you'll be able to pull out these elements and expand on them. Go through them, pull out 3, maybe 4 qualities that you want to present, and keep coming back to these main ideas, reiterating them, reaffirming them, and instilling them in the mind of the interviewer. So the question now is, how can you make sure that these ideas are coming through? What I want to do now is take these qualities, your resilience, your grit, I like that one, integrity, your interest in people, and altruism, and yes, even your work ethic, and think of a couple of stories for each quality. If these truly are your qualities, this exercise should not be difficult at all. You should have several instances where you've demonstrated each characteristic. Some of your stories will illustrate multiple qualities, which is even better. To put it another way, I'm asking you to think about your own qualities and your characteristics rather than answers to specific questions. It's a shift in thinking that's going to help give you a lot more flexibility during the interview. For instance, a typical applicant first describes his research like this. I've been involved with the Johnson Lab for the past 3 years. My main role is in interpreting data. I'm involved in weekly group discussions. I've authored a review to determine efficacy. I'm also working on another review now. I'm interested in collecting data from various articles. It's a pretty basic description of just about every research project. It's not inaccurate, but it's not going to thrill anyone either. However, from these few lines, the applicant can pull out different elements: curiosity, critical thinking, and collaboration, which are some of the ideas that he wants to instill in the interviewer. Instead of making the interviewer do the work for you, though, bring those to the fore. Here's another way to look at it. I've been involved with the Johnson Lab for the past 3 years. What's interesting about my work is that while inputting and interpreting data, my critical thinking skills have gotten much stronger. Now I'm understanding subtleties in the data and detecting patterns I want to explain. Our lab is very collaborative, and I always look forward to contributing at our lab meetings and hearing about our projects. This description can't help but sound more engaging. The applicant's telling the same story, but this time he's pulling out the elements that he enjoys and that he's good at. But remember how I said not to write out that perfectly phrased answer? If you can remember a few key points you want to make, then you can much more easily revise them on the fly. So here's what that might look like as an outline. 1, I want to show that I was in the Johnson Lab for 3 years. 2, I want to show how my experience inputting and interpreting data reflects my critical thinking skills. And 3rd, I want to show how my contributions in hearing others illustrates my collaboration. But what if this person does not get asked about research? What if he's asked about how he's worked with teammates instead? In that case, the story is easy to modify again. I've been involved with the Johnson Lab for the past 3 years. Our lab is very collaborative. At our weekly group discussions, everyone has a chance to share our projects and help each other with problems. Inputting and interpreting data can be solitary work, but when I'm sharing the patterns that I want to explain, I find that input from other lab members has really helped my critical thinking skills. So you see, if you can get comfortable with your stories and know the elements that they can illustrate, you'll be able to address and adapt to unexpected questions with no trouble. Now I want to talk about strengths and weaknesses. Medical schools are very fond of asking applicants to identify these. If you've already figured out what qualities are present in your stories, this is a pretty easy question. Say you've prepared a way to talk about your research, your community service, and your work on a foreign mission. So far, the interviewer has asked you about your mission and your community service. So you can use this opportunity to bring up your research, which, as you've already decided, illustrates your critical thinking and teamwork abilities. Choose one of these as your strength. Pop it in your examples in the research lab, and away you go. Your greatest weakness is trickier, but again, it's about framing your answer. Nobody's perfect, and med schools want students who are self-aware enough to know their weaknesses. They also want to know that they aren't debilitating or limiting your study of medicine, and that you're working on them. There's no point in saying you're a perfectionist, but you might be overly detail-oriented, which is not necessarily a bad thing in some medical fields. Or you might have a tendency to bite off more than you can chew and feel like you're letting people down, a common problem for med school applicants. Or on the other extreme, you might be shy or too introverted or have trouble taking risks. Any of these weaknesses can be severely debilitating, or they might be no big deal. But I think it can be human nature to imagine the worst. So in your interview, rein in their imagination. Explain how your shyness kept you from joining clubs in high school, or share a time when you had trouble balancing all your responsibilities. This will set boundaries for your weakness, hopefully ones that aren't insurmountable. Sharing what you've done to overcome your weakness can also be important. Whether you've explored better time management or joined a local Toastmasters club, show the interviewer that you don't just know about your weakness, but that you're taking steps to conquer it. But what about those weak spots on your application? Do you have a failed class or even a bad year, a big gap that you need to explain? Again, knowing these ahead of time will go a long way to addressing them in an interview. It might sound cliched, but honesty really is the best policy here. Frame your answers in a way that shows that you accept responsibility for whatever happened and that you have learned from the experience. As well as knowing your stories, you need to show that you know a great deal about the school. You can subtly introduce this information in your answers. You might do this by linking your research interest to one of their programs, or by describing your interest in global medicine by mentioning a global health exchange. For example, if you're asked about your research with targeted insulin receptors, you might start your answer with something like, "I'm glad you asked me about that, because the East Harlem Health Outreach Partnership on Diabetes is one of the main reasons I like Mount Sinai." And close with something like, "I learned a lot from my research," or "I've learned a lot about diabetes in the lab, and now I would really like to see how it's treated in the community here." So these details are integrated into your answers about yourself. To get these details, your first stop should be the program's website. You probably already visited it when you were explaining why you were drawn to the school in the first place. But I think the absolute most useful place to visit is the news section of their website. Is there a new labor and delivery wing that they're especially proud of? Did a research program that you're interested in just get funding? Have they created a new scholarship for research fellows? These are the kinds of things that admissions people love to talk about, and the kinds of things that you should know before setting foot on campus. And how about that question, why should we choose you over the other applicants? I like to start this one with humility, with an acknowledgement that every person they're talking to is qualified and would probably be a great medical student, before breaking down those 3 impressions or qualities that you chose at the start. Show them that you know yourself, and that will help them see how you fit into their class. Before we move on to practice methods, let's talk about how to handle that most dreaded question of all, tell me about yourself. This is often one of the first questions you'll encounter in an interview, and it's where you can establish the ideas that you want to present, setting the stage, as it were. I think there's a natural tendency to tackle this question in chronological order. So many people start with, "I was born in," but you don't have to. It can work, but finding a common theme that pulls together varied elements of your background can be much more engaging. What I like to do with my clients is to have them take on this question by, first of all, just throwing out any ideas they might want to include. The most common elements are family background or cultural upbringing, interest in science or research, community or clinical activities, and personal hobbies. These are all different things that might be included in your answer. After this, for lack of a better word, brain dump, we repackage it. For instance, with this applicant, who was a research-oriented applicant whose mother immigrated from China, she wanted to show how this person and idea had inspired her and framed a life dedicated to teaching and learning. So she started with, my strongest trait is my love of learning, inherited from my mother. She fought to attend college in China and never let me forget how precious education was. Then she went through varied aspects of that, how she nurtured the love of discovery after they immigrated to the U.S., the curiosity of the natural world led her to her research and wanting to find out answers, and the discovery of new ways to see through photography, which she'd explored as a hobby. Showing the gift of education was shared with others was a good way to bring in her health education outreach. And she closed it with this idea that her mom was determined to discover a better world, and now she was continuing that quest with a career in medicine. So this kind of answer can work out really well to show the theme that you want to use throughout an entire answer about yourself, rather than just giving a chronological retelling. Or you might want to highlight qualities like discipline and teamwork, like this applicant with a strong history of community service did. Growing up in Texas, I thought I would be a professional baseball player. But when I turned 17, I realized I enjoyed the time I spent volunteering in the nursing home more than being on the field. It's always a good idea to embed your qualities in details of your life. Often, it's these atypical background details that catch the interviewer's attention. There's a good chance that the interviewer is going to ask this applicant about his baseball career, which will help him stand out. An older non-traditional applicant might ramble through the twists and turns of his career, which runs the risk of boring listeners. Or he might start out with a startling statement like, my high school biology teacher said I'd never amount to anything. As I spent a couple of years painting houses in the hot Florida sun, sometimes I thought he was right. But today I work for a vaccine company supporting 35 scientists and training nurses on medical equipment. How I got here is an interesting story. Again, it's that interesting story, those details that are yours alone that can make the difference and make them remember you. These are all real answers, with the details changed, of course, that my clients and I developed based on what initially might have seemed like a mass of unconnected ideas. The key is to get these ideas out before you try to make sense of them. Writing them, or better, recording them, is that brain dump that I was talking about. And if a friend or admissions consultant can help you sort through them and find the themes, so much the better. It can be hard to be objective about your own experiences. I'm often asked if this tell me about yourself question needs to explain an applicant's motivation for medicine. While I think the stories you share should naturally lead to this question, I do think it's a different question. And while you probably have aspects of your interest in medicine in there, your research or clinical work, for instance, you'll need more if you truly want to tell them about you. So in short, the idea for all of this is to make sure that you know your answers, that you're not reading them and you haven't memorized them, but that you are able to focus on learning stories you can adapt for various purposes, and that you're comfortable telling them in various ways, and that you know the goals that you want to accomplish during your interview. Now, I want to talk about practice methods for a few minutes. Remember that you want your interview to be conversational, engaging, and unrehearsed. That's a really tall order when you're feeling nervous and maybe even a little desperate. Practice is the only thing that will help you feel comfortable and even natural telling your stories. There are many ways you can practice, both by yourself and others. You can talk to yourself. I think that this is by far the most useful way to practice your stories. Talk to yourself whenever you're alone, when you're driving in a car, when you're in the shower, when you're washing dishes. I love this method because I think it really helps you to get comfortable telling things, and you don't have to set aside a designated practice time for it. People around you may think that you've lost it, that you're actually going crazy, but being able to talk about different situations in your life and just comfortably share the stories and the experiences you had is going to be so valuable during the interview. Another thing you might want to do is to debate yourself. Often you'll be asked ethical or philosophical questions at the interview. There are really no right or wrong answers here. The interviewers want to know that you're informed and able to think. Reading current issues of JAMA is a great way to prepare, and the University of Washington has a great bioethics discussion page about patient issues that I think everyone should look at. But it's one thing to read articles and another to present them cogently. That's where this method comes in. Argue both sides of a popular debate. Stem cell research, for instance, or marijuana legalization. Presenting these different viewpoints will ensure that you really understand them and that you can make an argument for or against an issue. Another thing you might want to do is record and listen to yourself. I don't recommend you do this every time because I think it gets away from that informal storytelling that I was talking about earlier. But it's a good idea to hear how you sound to others. If you're speaking in a monotone, if you're going too fast, or if you're overusing fillers like and actually. If you do this at the early stages of your practice, I guarantee it will help you identify areas to improve. You can also practice with a webcam or a mirror. This is a good way to see if you're leaning forward to answer your questions or if you're drawing back and looking defensive, or if there's something really annoying that you do with your hand, or if there's anything else in your appearance that may give the interviewer the impression that you're not engaged. I also recommend practicing with other people. Give your parents, roommates, friends a list of questions and have them fire them at you. I wouldn't do this right at the start. Do this after you're more familiar with your stories. But if you do it later and you're able to, show them that you're able to practice being adaptable with different questions fired at you, it can really help you. Be sure to ask for honest feedback though, or you won't get it. You can also schedule a mock interview with a consultant. We're paid to give you honest feedback, and this can be a really useful tool to help you identify and address difficult questions or problem areas. You can start practicing anytime. In fact, the earlier, the better. The more aware you are about your personal quirks, the more likely you'll have time to address them. And the more accustomed you are to sharing your stories, the more comfortable you'll be in the interview. That's it for tonight. I know a lot's riding on your next interview, and I hope what we talked about will help you nail it. If you have questions, please stick around and let me know. We've got some time before the end of the hour, so I'll be happy to talk to you about them.
I want to thank you so much for this very informative webinar. I'm sure everyone here now has the tools to nail that interview, or some of them, and we'll take additional questions in just a minute. But now it's my turn to share a few thoughts about the med school interview. Friends, if you're lucky enough to get called for interviews, first of all, take a moment to celebrate. You've made enough of an impression with your primary and secondary applications for the school to want to invest more time in getting to know you and seeing if you are a fit for their community. That invitation represents opportunity. But it also presents risks. Are you going to present yourself in your interview as a future professional? Are you going to come across as someone who would be a thoughtful member of their community and later a compassionate physician whom the interviewer could see treating his or her loved one or family member? Are you going to successfully implement all the excellent advice that Sid has presented today? That's your challenge, and it's a challenge Sid and her colleagues here at Accepted would like to help you meet with flying colors. I'd like to tell you about a call I had not too long ago. An applicant called inquiring about a med school mock interview package. I gave her the details, and at the end of the call, she said to me, I have one more question. Why do I need this service? Can't I just interview on my own? Can't I just research the schools, think about likely questions and my best answers? Well, Sid's given you a lot of suggestions as to how you can do exactly that, and they're excellent suggestions. But here's the answer that I replied to her, and I'm going to tell you also. I asked her, have you ever performed either in music, theater, the arts, or sports? Yes, she replied, I played piano. Would you consider performing without rehearsing? Would you want to get on stage after having just thoroughly reviewed the musical score and thought about it? I don't think so. Our mock interview is like a rehearsal, and like all rehearsals, it allows you to improve and polish your performance before the big day. Let's look at some sample feedback from people who've had their dress rehearsal with Accepted. I'll just give you some highlights. I don't think I would be in the same place today without your help. So out of 20 secondaries, I received 18 interviews. I went to 11, I was accepted to 5, and waitlisted to 4. That's the one on the bottom left. Or the one on the top of it. Thank you so much for your help so far. I've been invited to 17 interviews, accepted at 4 schools, and awarded a full scholarship at one of them. These were both for Sid's clients. Or just in case Sid is booked when you want your mock interview, I don't want you to think that she's the only one who can provide a mock interview. So here is feedback for Alicia. I had the pleasure of working with Alicia to prepare for my medical school interview. Through our many practice sessions, I felt confident and prepared the day of the interview and was fortunate to receive an acceptance to the medical school of my dreams. These applicants are pursuing their medical school dreams. I'd like to urge you to follow the path they took so that you too can pursue your dreams. And there's the information. Go to exhibit.com/mediv, choose a service that's right for you, get the guidance you need, and then interview confidently and effectively. And we are also offering this evening to those of you participated, $100 off our gold mock interview package. Use coupon code SAVE100 at the checkout, and I think this is good for tonight. Okay, again, it's SAVE100 at checkout. If you're interested, you can, and that will give you actually 3 rehearsals, if you will, for one school's interview, and you'll be all well prepared and much calmer. Now for your questions. There's several questions here, and Sid, you ready to take the questions?
Yeah, I sure am.
Okay, so the first one is from Laura, and she had an excellent question, and I accidentally responded to it, but here it is. I didn't respond with a relevant answer. Her question is, during the interview, should you share different stories than the ones you wrote about in your application, or should you expand or reintroduce those stories from the application in the interview?
So sometimes you'll have closed files. In that case, the interviewer won't have read any of your application materials. So feel free to talk about anything that you wrote about or anything new. If they already have your application, it's likely that they'll ask you about things in that you've already written about, which is fine, and you can talk about them again. However, be very clear that you don't contradict anything. That is one of the big sort of warning signs or red flags to interviewers. You want to be consistent between what you've written and what you present in the interview. So yeah, you can definitely talk about the same things. You can, even if you've written about it extensively, refer to it so you don't have to repeat everything. Say, I already wrote about, my research in France extensively, and I'm happy to answer more questions about it. But let me tell you about this other side. So, you can add new things. Again, the key is to just be really conversational and try to show that you know your stories, and that the things that you can't invent new experiences, so you can definitely recycle them for the interview. But do try to present it in a lively, engaged way.
Okay. We have some questions here about the mock interview services that we offered, and I'm going to address those. One is, should we register for a mock interview service after we receive an invitation to an interview, or do it now before submitting the primary or secondary? I would wait till you get the invitation, because if you end up not getting invited, there is a cancellation fee on the service, and it doesn't make sense to, the math doesn't work, so you wouldn't be saving any money.
Just in terms of timing, I would add that I find that I recommend that you schedule the mock interview for 2 weeks, 10 days to 2 weeks before the actual interview. I find that that's a good time to give you time to practice, but it's not such a great time that you are going to lose the momentum that you built during the interview.
Right. Also, that's actually another one of the questions is, how fast do we respond? We usually get back to you either the same day of purchase, and you can usually schedule your interview for within a couple of days of purchase. This is from Vishali. And while I certainly agree with Sid that 10 days is like optimal, if you don't have the 10 days, I still think you're better off having the mock 3 days or 4 days or 2 days before the actual interview than not having it at all. There's optimal and there's still good, okay?
Yeah, and I've interviewed people the night before. When I do the night before, my focus was a little bit different. So I'm asking them less about, teaching them less about how to practice and more, there's a lot of cheerleading and building your spirits up and getting you ready for the interview. So that's a big part of it. And it really, I think all the admissions consultants can be very adaptable with what you need.
Right. And Marion is asking I'm wondering how long one rehearsal is for. One mock interview is usually like 30 minutes roughly of actual interview, and then followed up by about another half hour of feedback. Is that fair, Sid?
Would you mind if I tell them how I do my mock interviews?
Absolutely. Go for it. Okay, go for it, Sid.
So other consultants really do the traditional mock interview, which is 30 minutes firing questions at you and then give you feedback. And some people love this. I don't find it that works for me as well, because I like to give feedback while you're answering. And I think that helps you, if you need help with the brain dump, for instance, I'm not going to wait until you've gone through a bunch of other questions to come back and try to help you go through it. So what I like to do is we'll work on one question, tackle it, and I'll give you feedback then. And then the next question you can use what I've given you as feedback to try to improve the next session. So I do a full hour of questions, which is usually about maybe 8 questions, but we also talk about how to phrase them and how to recycle them for other questions. So mine's a little different.
Okay. All right. Let's get back to some of the questions here.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on a second.
Can I bring up a couple of things that I think are really useful?
Sure.
There's several people that are asking about what questions you asked to the interviewer.
Right.
Again, I think that going to the news section of the website is really a good way to find questions. You can ask them about new developments in their program or new facilities they have. Those are, like I said, those are always things that admissions people love to talk about. So that's a really good place for it. Another thing you can ask is like, what opportunities are there for me? If it's a new school, ask what kind of, new programs that they're developing, or what are they doing to ensure that, you'll be well prepared for your STEP exams later. Showing that you know about the school, that you're not just asking them, very basic questions, but that you're trying to find a real match is what's really important in asking those questions.
I also like to sometimes say, if you have a particular interest, like let's say you're interested in rural medicine or a particular aspect of rural medicine, and the school has a program in rural medicine, then you might ask a question that show, you've read the material on rural medicine on the site, but you have a question based on what you've read that relates to your specific interest.
Yeah. Yep, for sure.
Okay. All right. Did we answer the question for anybody? Raise your hand if you got enough ideas on that, or you want us to come up with some more. All right, the hands are going. Great. Okay. Andrew asks, how should we prepare for bioethic questions such as stem cell research? What resources do you suggest in preparing?
So I kind of referenced it in there. I think the best site is UW's bioethics department's page. They have wonderful questions for people who are addressing these, like how do you break bad news to a patient? I would definitely recommend, don't go through it and try to read everything, but there's some really good topics there. And, it depends how much time you have, but if you do have time to read some of the ones, especially about, dealing with difficult clients, or how to, deal with end-of-life issues. Those are the kind of things that someone else would ask if they ask controversial questions. And yes, they often do. They'll ask questions that are about the news. They want to know that you know what you're getting into. And medicine is not a conflict-free field by any means. But they also don't want to see that you are, so, I guess, rigid and flexible. They want to see that you've thought about it, that you form that you have a reasonable way to approach it, and that you are, able to converse about it. So, don't come across as being dogmatic about anything, but definitely, show that you have thought about it.
Right. Maybe even show that you understand both sides of a position.
Yeah. Yep. That's always good.
Okay. Maria asks, how do you feel about joking during an interview?
It really depends. if it can come across as flippant, there's danger of it failing. So, I mean, I would never do it, but that's not my personality. I think other people might do it and be more successful at it. So it would really depend on who you are.
Okay. Rima asks, do you want to stick to experiences before college or after college?
College and above, preferably.
Yes.
Like
Right.
they want to know your recent history more than what happened to you in high school.
Okay. And let's see, what else do we have here? How long do the medical school interviews actually last? So what's a typical traditional interview? How long is it?
Oh, it depends. Some are 30 minutes. Some are, your school will tell you. They'll probably give you a schedule when you're invited, or that information will be on their website. But they can vary. Like it can be an interview with 3 people. It can be one-on-one interviews. You can have, an interview with students. Some people interview with only professors or faculty. So it really varies.
Okay. Sarah asks, how do I find a good balance between professionalism and personality? I don't want to come off like a robot, but I don't want to give the impression that I'm not taking the interview seriously.
Okay, I think this is a good example of how you can really benefit from practicing your stories and knowing them inside and out. I think you're going to feel a lot more comfortable and not come across as a robot if you're actually able to talk about yourself, in a fluid way. And people are nervous during these interviews. Nobody is going to come across as being their very best self in these. So don't put unreasonable pressure on yourself to, perform in a certain way. But I think if you are more comfortable and you've practiced these stories a lot, that's going to kick in sort of those mental connections are going to kick in even when you're nervous. And you'll be better. It's a hard question if you know that you come across as being a robot. Do some things beforehand to try to relax yourself. That can mean, doing something more, physical exertion before the interview would be a good idea. Or, look online for some other methods for how to relax yourself. But I think being a robot is natural.
Breathing exercises you recommended.
Yeah. I think that's a natural result of being nervous. So don't be too obsessed with it. Just know who you are and what you want to talk about in the interview.
Okay. Derek asks, what if your medically related experiences aren't particularly unique or groundbreaking? Is it any less appealing if you just have done volunteering, shadowing, scribing, and medically related research?
So this is something everybody always says is I haven't done really unique things. And this is where I think, this is one of the biggest parts of my job is trying to help people see that the way that you view your experiences is what makes them unique. People say that, 3 people can see a car accident and come out with 3 completely different versions of what happened. And it's that perspective that you bring to it that is yours alone. So it's not the experience. I mean, you can be giving water to patients and blankets to patients or, cleaning exam rooms the same as every other person, but it's what you think about it and what you've learned from it and what you've taken from it and how it affects you. Those are the things that make it unique and that are really important in figuring out if you are, suited for medicine or not.
Okay. Now, several of you have asked about multiple mini interviews, which we're not covering this evening, but we did cover them in another webinar, and I'm going to send you that URL right now. So after we finish this evening, which will be in a couple of minutes, if you're interested, it's, again, I sent the URL for it, but it's called 12 Tips for Multiple Mini Interview Success. Again, that's 12 Tips for multiple mini interview success. And with that, I want to thank you listeners for attending, for your time, your attention, your questions, and your answers. You've been a fantastic audience, great questions, great answers, great participation. I also want to thank accepted consultant Sydney Foote again for her very informative and practical advice webinar. And I want to tell you, Sid, that there have been many thank yous coming in the question window as we've been talking.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Last thought before we leave. Remember the applicants who had their dress rehearsal with an accepted med school admissions expert? It's far better to go into the interview knowing that you're prepared and ready than to be in the interview wishing you'd had that dress rehearsal beforehand. Do as these applicants did. They are now pursuing their med school dreams. You can too.